The Rutgers Business School Virtual Luncheon Series is part of Dean Lay's Lifelong Learning Initiative. 4 RBS departments proudly collaborate to bring you this series: Executive Education, Alumni and Corporate Engagement, Development, and Communications. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenters for B2B marketing in a post-pandemic world. Today we're having a conversation on what to do to replace in-person events featuring Tim Peter and Mike Moran. Mike is a very popular Rutgers Mini MBA instructor. He's a former IBM Distinguished Engineer, and he's Chief Product Officer at Solo Segment, a MarTech and consulting company that helps B2B companies drive more leads from their websites. Mike regularly works with B2B clients, making the transition from in-person events. Mike, I'm going to throw it to you to kick things off.
Thanks a lot, Margaret. I'm joined by Tim Peter, who's also a popular Rutgers Mini MBA instructor. I'd say more popular than me. He's also an award-winning marketer. He's got extensive experience in hospitality, technology, and B2B marketing, and he's also one of my partners at Solo Segment. So, Tim, you've been named one of the most influential marketers in travel and hospitality. So, unfortunately, this is a time when you and your clients are on the front lines of this. So we're living, as they say, in unprecedented times over the last few months when it comes to B2B events. What are the big changes you're seeing in business travel for trade shows, conferences, and other in-person events?
Yeah, so the big change you're seeing is that it stopped, right? It has gone to, it has either gone to zero or it rounds to zero. And I want to be fair, we may have folks listening who might be outside the US. We're going to talk mostly about US data today. Obviously, we're seeing some pockets of optimism outside North America, outside the US. But in the US, essentially, those numbers have gone to zero. Basically, nobody's traveling for business for all practical purposes. There are very, very few trade shows that are happening. And the ones that are happening tend to be happening online. And frankly, most of those companies are still working through how to make those work effectively and be useful to folks. So that's sort of the big trend we're seeing there.
Right. That was going well. I want to really emphasize how right I thought you were, Tim. So one of the things I want to do is ask you, kind of the big question of how long do you think it's going to take for trade shows to resume?
So, boy, this is the $1 million question, isn't it?
We're not paying you for this. I thought they explained.
Oh, well, in that case, then we'll call this, the $100 answer. But realistically, I think this data is probably on the optimistic side. The big wild card in this is, do we get, a vaccine in any great scale, or do we come up with a better test and trace program or things along those lines, which could accelerate this? But anything before, the third quarter of 2021 or the fourth quarter of 2021, I think is very optimistic at this point. And the reason I think that is because A, we've seen people cancel things into the second quarter already. And B, any large trade shows that you would expect to happen in the second quarter, they'd be planning them right now. And at least from the folks I'm talking to, they're not. So realistically, there's very little likelihood that we're going to see a lot of activity in Q2 of 2021. It's going to be Q3 is best case or later, barring some other medical intervention or the like.
Got it. So I know that was a hard question because it's kind of a moving target. So yeah, I've got a slide up that says, from first half of 21. That's what people thought in May when we were a couple of months into this.
Right.
Then they've asked later, and there are meeting planners that have been more optimistic, likely because their job depends on it and they're kind of in denial. This stuff feels like whistling past the graveyard to me, because I just don't see that these people are being realistic. But if you look at this, just look at how these numbers have changed just over a couple of weeks in between the polls, right? And even they are now starting to say what you're saying is best case. It's kind of second half of 21. And so I guess
And if I can jump in for 1 second on that data, just for a quick moment, is we've seen, you have to remember in late June, things were looking more positive. So I've seen some more recent data and some more recent polls as we talk to people where, the data has gotten worse still. You'll notice there was a little bit of a bounce, to 25% and the like. That's actually gotten worse as we've gone along. So sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's good. So I guess what I'd like to do now is ask our audience what they're thinking here. So Margaret, if we could run our first poll, so you can see that the poll is open, and if you could click on the results so that you on the questions so that you can give your answer. We want to ask you, when will business trade shows and conferences resume? What do you think? Because we haven't seen a poll from the last few weeks, and so we'd really like to ask you what's happening here, because I think that as Tim said, there's a lot of factors. It's a very complicated question. It's also very personal, that different people might have different opinions. So love to see how you are expecting this to play out, and how you're thinking about it when you're planning your B2B marketing, which in many cases is probably dependent on trade shows.
Which, by the way, if I can add, I mentioned, second half of 2021, I would be thrilled to be wrong about that number. I would love that to be earlier in the year, obviously.
Right.
Mike, are you able to see the results that I just posted?
No.
Okay, then let me share them with you.
Go ahead,
can you see
Margaret.
them, Tim?
Yeah, I sure can.
Oh, perfect. Then I'll let you do that.
No problem. So we got 4%.
I got it now. Sorry.
There we go. Mike, do you want to talk us through?
Oh, sure. So it looks like there's some people that are thinking, maybe almost half of the crowd thinks that it'll happen sometime in 2021, with more of them saying in the second half. But over a third of people say may not. It's not really something I want to give a time to. It's not until there's a factor that changes, where an effective treatment or vaccine. So that's actually really telling, because as B2B marketers, you're the people that need to decide to buy a booth for these trade shows to really work. You're the people who have to decide to sponsor. You're the people who have to decide that you're going to make a speech at one of these shows. And if you're not ready to do those things, and it looks like a very high percentage of you are not for quite a while, that's that's really telling. Tim, I guess what I'd like to ask you is, what are the factors that you see needing to be in place before trade shows and conferences can resume?
Yeah, so there's a bunch. I mean, the first is, right at the moment, you've got a lot of restrictions on where people can travel and when they can travel, right? You've got states that want people to go into quarantine if you cross various state lines. So those government restrictions have to be have to come out of the way. We have to see demand for air travel. Most of the air providers have cut capacity, have cut flights dramatically, because demand is down 80%, right? So even if you wanted to go to some places today, the flights just simply don't exist or are significantly reduced. Obviously, we are seeing economic effects of all this, with people furloughed, with people unemployed, et cetera, and a lot of businesses have tightened their belts, and so budgets have to come back into play in a way where people want to spend, where businesses want to spend. Obviously, for many businesses, they have a duty of care to their employees, and if we're going to be blunt about this, an insurance liability concern there. So businesses have to be willing to say, yes, I want to put people on a plane, or I want to put them, out on the road. Once the businesses say it's okay, the people who have to get on that plane or get out on the road have to say, no, I'm cool with it too. And I think that's a bigger factor than people realize. And then finally, you have to have event planners who are confident that if I invest in a conference today and can get insurance to put on that conference right now, will I do so? I think it'll be written into the contracts, and it'll be written into the liability and the like. But right now, most event planners are looking for alternatives because there's just so many unknowns. So again, I think those are the major factors. With, obviously, I cannot emphasize this enough. I know I've said it already, but also with the the wild card of hopefully we get a vaccine before too long, or hopefully we get some test and trace before too long. But those are the things that have to happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as I mentioned before, I think one way to judge whether when you think things are going to come back is to ask yourself when you would be ready to commit to buy a booth at a trade show. And if you're saying, well, I'm not ready to buy a booth, and it doesn't really matter what date it is, I'm not ready to until I see something, well, that gives you an idea of whether the trade show organizers are going to put on a trade show, because they have a lot more at stake than whatever you would pay for a booth. So I've been writing about these things too, Tim, and I've been predicting a return no sooner than 2022, and I've been called bearish and worse on some of these articles, and I think it's almost started to turn into kind of a political question now. It kind of tells you, who you voted for, whether you think that this is just kind of a matter of everybody has to just decide, we're going to get through this. But I just don't think it's really a question of consumer confidence. It's not merely that, right? Because there's an actual disease out there that's killing people. Right. And people, I think, have legitimate reasons for being concerned about this. And people who are running these businesses have reasons to want to be a little trepidatious about going forward, because if you imagine how much money they've lost on these events that have had to be canceled, it's not like they've got this huge pot of money that's just waiting to be bet again, right? I mean, they have to kind of feel like it's more of a sure thing before they're ready to do that.
Yeah, if I can add one quick point to that, I mentioned the insurance thing about, getting coverage for these events and the like. Somebody asked me not long ago, are conference planners having trouble getting insurance? And what we're seeing, generally speaking, is not only are they not having trouble getting insurance, they're not asking for coverage because they're not prepared to start them yet. And if you think about, big events and how long they take to plan out, some of this is just a natural consequences. If everything was perfect tomorrow, you'd still be talking 12 months because some of these events take 9, 10, 11 months to put together.
Right, right.
So nonetheless, Mike, I know you've been talking to a lot of B2B marketers through this period. What have those conversations been like? What are you hearing from people?
I think it's changed a little over time. Right at the beginning, late March, early April, I think a lot of B2B marketers were almost in shock. It was kind of a who moved my cheese moment, where they were seeing all their plans for marketing for the second half of the year just dropping week by week. I mean, every week there'd be some major conference that was canceled that would be in the news. There was announcements from governments that you weren't allowed to hold conferences because there was no gatherings allowed from a certain size. But those big stories kind of masked an even bigger story, which was all of the smaller events, all of the private events, all of the things that people had been planning on, had paid for in many cases, or had paid a lot towards, that just were disappearing because nobody wanted to go, or nobody was able to go, or budgets were getting cut because people were concerned about the economic fallout. And so I think that there was kind of a moment where people were frozen. They kind of didn't know what to do. And I think they felt like they could kind of wait things out and see what happened, and didn't do anything for a little period of time. But as I started talking to them, and I talked to dozens and dozens of B2B marketers over this period, I started asking them questions like, how many leads did you get from in-person events last year? Or how much of your revenue was driven by in-person events last year? And they'd give me a number. And then I would say, well, how much do you think you're going to get this year? And that was really where they started to realize, boy, I can't really wait. I got to start thinking about this. And so to me, that's where you start. You actually start by figuring out how big the problem is, how large is the hole, that you have to fill.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think we want to come on to a second poll question, time for the audience, which is what percentage of your leads or sales came from in-person events this year? Let's see what folks come back with here. And I think we want to see what's happening from this perspective. This dependency is pretty reasonable, because in many industries and many of the folks we talk to, many of the folks we work with, and study after study have shown that in-person events often drive some of the best leads. You're meeting people in person, it allows you to build trust, it allows you to get to know them. And so that's, a really good source of connecting with people, and it's a really good source of developing those leads. And building trust is obviously one of the biggest hurdles, if not the biggest hurdle, you have to clear when you make a sale. So it's natural that we would tend to gravitate towards in-person events because they work. So let's take a look at the results and see how much in-person events mattered this year. So let's see, the largest share is between 30 and 60%. So 37%, excuse me, the largest share is under 30%, which is 47% of people. But we have fully 53% of the respondents are getting somewhere between 30 and 90% of your leads from in-person events. That is a big hole. And even if you're under 30, let's say it's 10%. If I told you today you're going to lose 10% of your business for the coming year, you're going to have to come up with plans to solve that. So we've listed the choices we've heard about with our clients. Many of these things, these are the kinds of things that we have to have happen so that you can grow those leads. So let's go and talk about, what are you planning to do instead of in-person events? If you know that you're going to lose, at least 10, and in some cases up to 90 to fill this hole, what are you planning to do? Where are you going to go ahead and get these leads from? Now, we've listed the choices that we've heard in most of our discussions. These are things you may have been doing already, but some of them are virtual events. Some of them are programmatic advertising is up in a big way, which is really interesting for B2B since it often sees the lowest ROI. We're seeing people do more webinars and things like that, but we'd like to see what you all are doing, and then we will go ahead and take a look.
Yeah, and some of the things that we put on the list, some of them have more known ROI than others, like the virtual events. There's been a lot of talk around them because that seems like the simplest thing to do is to switch to a virtual event, but there's not a lot of buzz around how the ROI has been on that and whether they actually drive leads. And it makes sense because it's a new thing to try, but it sounds very natural that that's where you would go next, but it's not clear that that's actually the best place to put your money.
I wanted to point out to our audience that they can actually on this one select more than one item, because we're aware that you may be making more than one effort at this to replace your trade show events.
So we're just going to wait for a little bit more data to come in, but yeah, I'm looking at the responses live, and so we see that half of respondents have selected virtual events to replace conferences. Another half have said more traditional webinars. A whole bunch of people said more to drive traffic, so email, social ads. Happily, a very small number said, our budget got cut, no money to spend. That's really great. I actually expected that number to be much larger. But less than a third have said more investment in website customer experience, and that's surprising. If you're driving traffic to your website, if you're meeting people at webinars and the like, getting people to get to your site and convert seems like a place you might want to do, a little bit more effort. So why don't we go ahead and talk about that as we go forward?
Yeah. So so I think I'm actually not surprised based on the conversations I've had. I actually see people focused a lot more on driving traffic and the top end of the funnel than they are at trying to progress leads on the website. So I'm actually the 30% is actually even a little higher than I was expecting to see, based on the conversations I've had. But I agree with you, Tim, that and we'll talk about this as we go deeper into the conversation. But that might be an area for people to be thinking about a little bit harder, because if you get people to come to the website, but nobody's actually turning into a lead, it's actually not that helpful. So one of the things I guess that I'm trying to think about here is Tim, if as we've moved from face to face to shelter in place, what kind of trends have you seen in the traffic to websites?
Yeah, so it varies industry to industry. Let's just start there. Obviously, you mentioned I do a bunch of work with hospitality. Hospitality has declined a fair bit. However, sales have declined in hospitality by far more than traffic has declined by far, far, far more. In most other industries, we're seeing traffic up, oh gosh, 20%, 30%, 50%. You're seeing big lift. Your customers have a lot of needs and a lot of areas where they're looking for help right now. And the things that were their go-tos either have changed, or the way that they're able to use those go-tos have changed, because they're sitting around, wearing pajama bottoms. And so they can't just walk up to somebody and talk about it. Not me, I'm saying other people that could be true.
I noticed you didn't stand up during this.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But it's this idea of more people are using digital. They're using digital channels. They're sitting at home and they've got time, and their commute is cut down and the like. They're not talking on the phone during their commute and the like. And so we're seeing big lift in traffic, and that's something we're seeing a ton of. So I think we may as well move on to our next poll question, right? Which is, how has your web traffic changed since the shutdown?
Yeah, let's see if our attendees are seeing that bump in traffic that you're talking about, right? It kind of makes sense that traffic would be up, because people are online even more now during their workday, and possibly because of the increased drive to web traffic that the polls we had earlier showed. So it would be kind of interesting to see what people are saying in terms of their traffic being up. As we see the numbers coming in, it looks like traffic is either unchanged or it's up for everybody. So it doesn't look like anybody is seeing that it's down, and so that's kind of something you might expect, that there's more chances for people to interact with you online, because they're sitting in front of their computer all day, and they've got more of a chance of doing that. So it looks like 7% said the traffic's down. No change. So about half said it's either down or unchanged is, I think, an easy way to look at that. And the other half say it's up either by less than 20% or by more than 20%. And so that's actually, to me, a very interesting outcome. Is that either based on the circumstances or based on the higher drive to web that we're seeing, that traffic is generally up. And that takes into account the fact that there are probably some people on this call where their industry has been affected, where you might be in the restaurant supply business, or there may be some other business that you're in that's a B2B company, but you're affected pretty seriously by the fact that your customers' business is down. And so even with that taken into account, we're seeing that in general, traffic is up. So I think that makes a ton of sense. I guess the thing that would maybe even be more interesting than whether your traffic is up is, how have your web leads and sales changed since the shutdown? Let's go to that poll, Margaret. So if we can look at that question, to me, I think, Tim, that's the thing. I guess I'm wondering, when you talk to people, what are you seeing?
Yeah, well, so when I talk to people, and again, it varies by industry, but what we tend to see is that leads and sales are flat. Folks are not seeing the boost in traffic, not seeing the boost in leads, they're not seeing the boost in sales that they are seeing in traffic. So it kind of makes me wonder, and this is what we mentioned before when we were talking about CX, is whether the effort that we're taking to drive more traffic to our websites is actually, not enough. If there's something more we ought to be doing there, or if there's other things we can be doing to drive more results from the folks who are coming to the website. A website that does not turn into a sale is sort of not a great salesperson, and there's some real opportunities there.
Yeah, that makes a great sense. That makes a lot of sense, Tim. I mean, and this, it looks like what you were seeing when you talk to customers is what everybody's saying. Some are saying it's down, but that's because their industry is affected, so that makes sense. But over 60% say no change. So over 50% said more traffic, but over 60% said we're not seeing any more leads.
Well, and if you add these together, you got 70 who are saying even if it's up, it's not up as much as web traffic, right?
That's good. Only 15% are actually seeing that they're getting more of a bounce than traffic. And so this was something we kind of talked about a little bit earlier, is that it kind of starts to make you wonder whether your investment in these new events, online events, and all the other traditional ways of driving traffic to your site, maybe that's not really the only thing you ought to be doing, because you're already getting more traffic and it's not working. You're not actually getting the value out of that traffic. So I see a question that's come in, says finding it from Sherry. It says finding it really difficult to connect with decision makers. I'm in manufacturing. I target buyers, purchasing agents. Should I be going directly to the engineer or product manager? So I have an opinion on that. Tim, what's your take?
So the answer is an answer is, you have to think about, are you connecting with people in a way that you're going to make the cash register ring, right? If this is somebody who can influence the sale, how are you getting in front of them in a way that they can influence the sale? If they're not going to influence the sale, then you need to be talking about how are we getting those folks who are going to influence the sale to progress through the journey, right? I mean, Mike, from your perspective, what are the mistakes that you're seeing people make, or what are the opportunities that people can do to address challenges like the one that Sherry points out?
Well, I think that, as I mentioned before, one of the mistakes, apologies audience, that I see people making is they're focused more on traffic than on leads. And when you look at the answers that this audience gave on how to cope with the pandemic, almost all of the dollars are going into driving more traffic to the website. Even though you all are saying kind of overwhelmingly that you're getting more traffic, but it isn't working. And so that kind of makes you wonder whether you should be doing something a little bit different, right? So it's kind of like if you were running a store where the cash registers don't always work, and you decide that the thing you're going to do is to take out even more ads in the newspaper circular to drive foot traffic. Right? It's like, well, we know the cash registers break sometimes, if we get people in the store and they can't always buy. And so, but we're not going to fix the cash registers. What we're going to do is we're going to get even more people to come in the store, because then when the cash registers work, there will be more people that are trying, right? And you can do that, right? This is kind of often called the leaky funnel approach, right? I mean, our funnel's leaking, but what we're going to do is we're going to pour even more water in the top, because then some of it will still get through, right? And maybe you want to think about the cash register. Maybe you want to think about what is it about your website that's basically telling people to go away? Well, what could you be doing on the website that would cause it to be more persuasive to the people that actually come? Because if you knew your website was very persuasive, basically if you knew the cash registers were working, then it would make a ton of sense for you to spend more money to get more people to come. But, to just say it in a snarky way, right? I mean, and I'm not saying this is true of you folks, but if your website's terrible, you probably want as few people to find it as possible, right? So, so really what you want to think about is there a way for you to really focus on making the website more persuasive and getting more of the people who come to raise their hand and say, yes, I'm a lead. Yes, I'm interested. Yes, I'd like to be sold to.
So we're seeing somebody has responded and said, I'm running a marketing campaign where I'm sending a video brochure to these decision makers, and those can be great at a certain point in the process, right? But if we're thinking beyond just the leaky funnel approach, what can people be doing instead to increase web leads and sales?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really what people are asking me, right? So it's not, I mean, these poll results that said, 70% are not seeing the full benefits of the increased traffic. In fact, 62% are not seeing any benefits of the traffic. They're getting the same leads that they were getting before with lower traffic. And so I'm getting this question all the time. And I think that it's a question you're asking, but I think you actually know the answer to it. I think you know what's wrong. I think you know the thing that really will increase leads is a good digital customer experience. So when they come to the website, do they have a good experience? Do they find the answer that they're looking for to whatever question they have? Are they able to compare your offerings against each other? Can they see information that persuades them that your promises actually hold water, right? Can they see very specific stuff? Do they see credible information, right? Those are the kinds of things that I think they know, because we talked before about why in-person sales work so much. It's because when they get to meet you and talk to you, they trust you.
Yeah.
And so what is it that you can do on your website that will overcome that trust barrier? That's really what we have to be asking ourselves, because good CX doesn't just eliminate the roadblocks that stop sales, but it also raises trust, because when you go to a website that works the way you're expecting it to work, and it just seems like they've got the answers to your questions, seems like no matter what you're concerned about, they've got some information that kind of puts your mind at ease, that causes you to think that they're really experts on your problem. They've done this before. They understand what you need. And so without in-person meetings, you really need your website to be trustworthy. The customers need to believe that they're going to get what they expect, and a good digital customer experience is what sets them up to believe that.
So, first of all, I agree completely, obviously, but I'm sure everybody who's listening, and in fact, we've seen a couple of comments to this very point, would know they want to have a good customer experience. They want to have a good digital customer experience, but they don't know what they should do. So, if you were talking right now to these people, to the folks on the call individually, what would you tell them to do? What can they do as the next steps?
Yeah, I'm going to tell them again. I think you already know, and here's how I'll prove it to you. Suppose I said to you to just think of a website that you think works really well. It's a really good customer experience. It just does what you want it to do. It seems easy. It's easy to get what you want. You're satisfied when you're done. And so just think of, a website that you think of that way. I think most people would think of Amazon. And so then the question that you need to ask yourself is, what is it that Amazon seems to do that lots of other websites don't do? And when you ask yourself that, I think you're basically going to come up with two things. The first thing is that when you search on that website, you always find what you're looking for. You find it there. And always is kind of maybe a little too strong, but it rounds to always. And in fact, here's the thing for you to ask yourself. When's the last time you went to Amazon and started navigating through the menus? Let's see, I want a book. Let me click on book. I guess it would be a mystery. So let me click on mysteries and let me start browsing until I see the title I had. You never do that, right? You always search. But then if you look at the statistics for your own website, you might find that, 1% of people search, 3% of people search, but on Amazon, it's 99% of people search. Why is it different? Is it because when people come to your website, they suddenly don't want to search anymore? I mean, half of them probably did a search to get there. But as soon as they get to your website, they don't want to search anymore? No, I'll tell you why they don't search on your website, because your search is terrible. And so if your search stinks on ice, what's happened is you have gradually taught people not to use it, people who otherwise would want to use it. And so that's maybe the first thing to be thinking about is, why doesn't your search work? Why can't you get people to be able to find what they're looking for? Because that's what they want to do. It's fast. And if you think about how many people are coming on mobile, it's really painful to navigate on mobile. And so the one thing that works on mobile is search. And so if they come to your site, they don't find what they're looking for, they're probably going back to Google to search. And maybe they find another page on your site, but maybe they find your competitors the next time. This isn't good for you, right? So the first thing that Amazon does really well is search. In fact, one of the ways you know Amazon is good at search is because for most things that you look for online, you go to Google and search for it. But when you're trying to buy something, you don't go to Google, you go to Amazon. And so if you're not even using Google to find which site to go to, that tells you that they have done something that you really want to do for yourself, right? Wouldn't you want people to be coming straight to your site because they know the answer's there and that's where they want to find it, right?
And
so that's
Mike,
the first thing.
If I can jump in on that for 1 second, if you pay attention to, the quarterly earnings calls of these companies, and I agree with this completely, obviously, but, the amount of money that Google is investing right now in improving the e-commerce experience is massive. They talk about it on every quarterly earnings call. They talk about it every time Sundar Pichai talks about what they're doing as a company, because they are losing search share to Amazon every time customers want to find a product. That's a clear sign that Amazon isn't just competing effectively, but at least in this niche, they're winning, which that really tells you something about how important this is to their business. Sorry, I cut you off. You were going to say, in addition to site search, what else?
Yeah, the second thing that Amazon does really well is they recommend other content. Right. So even though you searched and you found what you thought you were looking for and you were happy with what you found, you usually scroll down and see the little thing that says, hey, other customers that looked at this ended up buying this. Because you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I'd like to see what the other customers bought. It's not just you. I was flabbergasted when I saw this statistic. 35% of Amazon sales comes from people clicking those recommendations. So even though the search is really good and you think you found what you're looking for, over a third of the time you end up buying something else, because it's doing a really good job of recommending something else that's similar to this that other people liked even better. And so you're probably not in retail and e-commerce. You might say, how does this apply to me? Well, the way it applies to you is that you could be recommending other content. You could be showing content that's similar to this content at the bottom of your page. And that might help people to find the things that they're really looking for. And so those are the two basic things that Amazon does that have used massively, right? So almost 100% of people coming to Amazon use search, and over a third of them use that content recommendation. And so those are the two things that make you love Amazon. And those are the two things that on the digital experience are things that we'd like to figure out how to emulate in B2B.
Well, and one of the things I love about this discussion is you have heard me say this many, many, many times. I don't think you picked that example entirely at random, but one of my favorite quotes is from Jeff Bezos, where people constantly ask him, right? I mean, he's been this business visionary, he's a gazillionaire, and people always ask him, where are we going to be in 10 years? Where are we going to be in X number of years? And what's going to change while we get there? And his answer is, that's the wrong question. He said, we shouldn't think about what will change. We should focus on what won't change. He follows it up with this great line. He said, when he started this business, when he started Amazon, he said he thought, what are things that will never change? He said, people will always want selection, they'll always want variety, they will always want low prices, and they will always want fast shipping, right? He said, I can never see a case where people are going to say, no, I want fewer options and I want it to cost more and I want it to take a really long time to get to me. Like, that's just never going to happen, right? So
Yeah.
given that, what can businesses in B2B, continue to rely on as we go through these unprecedented times?
So I think that's going to be different in different industries, but in a lot of industries, it's going to be things like, I need to get really fast answers to my questions. I need to be able to make comparisons to help me make decisions. I need to be able to understand what my risk is as I'm making this purchase, right? So there's a lot of things that I think customers really want, and that you can deliver online. If you're relying on your salespeople to answer all of those questions, even for your existing customers, I mean, that's a good use of salespeople, and some of your customers really want that. But as customers start to skew towards millennials, which, Tim, you like to say are adults under 40, to kind of remind people my age that that's a lot of people.
And the largest share of the employee base today, the largest share of the workforce today. So these aren't the customers of the future. These are your customers.
Right. And they don't necessarily like to pick up the phone and call the salesperson every time they have a question, right? They'd rather get the instant gratification, and they'd rather not have to speak to somebody, right? A lot of us are that way. And so if you can answer those questions on your website, and, whether it's technical support, other kinds of customer support, other types of things, and that's going to be undoubtedly about search, then those are things where you can actually make the customers feel a lot better about you. And I think the thing to think about is, what will be the same in your business? What is it that people always want, and how do you deliver that digitally? And the other way to think about it, something that crosses all industries, is, suppose you actually rise to the bait and you say, okay, I got it. We need to really work on our digital customer experience. I believe you. But, I don't know how long this is going to be important, right? How long is the pandemic going to last? And the truth is, none of us know. But here's the thing I would ask you. If the pandemic was over in 6 months, it's back to normal, February, everything's back to normal, would you regret the fact that your website's way better now, that lots of people are searching and finding what they're looking for, that you're recommending good content for people and progressing their buyer journey, that your leads are suddenly way up? Would you say, oh boy, what a waste of money that was? Or is it still going to be really good that you did that, right? And so I think a lot of it is for you to kind of think about how you're going to approach this, how you're going to take advantage of this, because right now there's money out there that was going to trade shows and in-person events. And if they didn't just come in and cut that budget, you need to be spending it on something else. And so you can just spend it on driving more traffic, but you might be better off spending it on a better digital customer experience. Because I know it's kind of daunting to say, hey, you need to have a customer experience as good as Amazon's. Not really saying that. I'm saying that Amazon tells you what your customer experience could be if you were able to spend that much money and effort and time on it. Now, and your customers are Amazon customers too. So their expectations are being shaped by what they experience when they go to these consumer sites. And so they're not grading on a curve and saying, well, good old Charlie's widgets, we're not really, we know they stink on ice when it comes to web experience, but we love them anyway, right? I mean, they get frustrated. And so the thing to ask yourself is, it isn't that you have to be as good as Amazon. What I think you may need to ask yourself is, can you be better than your competitors? If your competitors are kind of having a sleepy moment in their digital experience, can you be better than them? Because that might be all you need to be in order to get customers to be more loyal.
Yeah, we had a question come in, and I'll take a shot at this one. But it says, does Amazon do a lot of B2B? And there's two answers to this. First, is exactly what Mike is saying. You have to remember, most people spend most of their time online, not on your website. They are learning what good experiences are like places that aren't yours. There's an old joke about, do you know why the gas pedal is on the right-hand side on the car and the brake is on the left? And the answer is because if you moved them, you'd kill somebody. Your customers are learning to drive by being on all the other sites. They know what good experience looks like. And when they come to your site, if it doesn't work like what they're accustomed to, they don't say, let me take some time and figure out how to work this. They say, now let me go find some place where this is easier to do. So that's the first problem. The second problem is Amazon does an increasing amount of B2B. Another Jeff Bezos quote that I like to use a lot is, he has said many times, your margin is my opportunity. You really don't want them to do more B2B, because talk to all the businesses in B2C who have had Amazon get into their business and discovered that was actually a terrible thing to have happen. And I don't mean just retailers, I mean suppliers, folks who actually made stuff and went to consumers suddenly have found, wow, Amazon's reaching deeper and deeper and deeper into my pocket with every sale. So your customers have an expectation. They're learning how to drive all, at places like Amazon. And when they come to you, they're going to crash and they're going to go find someplace else to do it. And if you give Amazon the opportunity to enter into your line of business, you're creating a much bigger problem for yourself than I think you want to deal with.
Yeah, and Tim, I see a question from Michael. It says, with sales under quarantine, it's critical for touch points when they can't reach our clients, and that couldn't be smarter, Michael. That's exactly right. Because if you think about what's going on here, many of you might be relying on the fact that your salespeople can kind of roam the halls at the client, or they have a really good relationship with the client. They have reasons to talk to the client. And some of those reasons have gone away if they're not able to be in person and not be able to be on site. And so what happens is they're missing out on what the opportunities are that's going on. They're missing out on what the client is deciding to do. And so the more that you can progress people online, the more of their questions you can answer. You can think of your website as being kind of a 24/7 salesperson, and all of your content, the goal is to overcome your customers' objections, just like salespeople do. And so what are objections when they're expressed online? Often they're searches, they're questions. What about this? What about that? I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure about that. How about this? How do you do that? Does it going to fit with what we do here? Those are all the questions that your customer is going through in their mind in the buyer journey. And so if you've got content that's crafted to answer those questions, whether they're navigating to it or they're searching for it, that's really what's going to progress the buyer journey. That's going to progress people so that they do go ahead and want to contact sales. They are ready to have a conversation, because what we find is that people want to arm themselves with enough knowledge that they don't feel like they're at a loss when they're talking to the salesperson. They want to feel like they don't want the salesperson to be so much more knowledgeable than they are. They want, because they feel kind of dumb, right? And they don't like to look dumb in front of another person, but they're happy to look dumb at your website or at Google, right? They're happy to be dumb on their own and get their questions answered. And when they think they've got enough information and they're on more of an equal footing with the salesperson in terms of their knowledge, that's when they reach out. And so if your website is the one that's educating them, then it's going to be your contact form that they're going to click on.
Yeah, this is actually a long-standing challenge in business and economics. It's known as an information disparity. And if you think about the industries, if you think about the businesses that have always relied on an information disparity to make a profit from their customers, that doesn't exist today. Your customers are doing Google searches. They're looking around for the information that they need so that they aren't dumb, so that they don't get taken advantage of. And today, your customers often know more about your products and services and prices than your actual employees do, because it's in their best interest to learn this stuff. So we're getting short on time. I know we have a couple more questions, plus some that have come in from the audience, Mike, that we want to be conscious of. I'm gonna kind of get to one of these really quick. Given how people are doing this right now, where are they finding the budget to do it? How are they managing to do this well? The folks you're seeing do this well.
We're seeing them applying the trade show budgets to digital. And they're sometimes tapping into even more funding. One of the things you may have noticed going on at your company is when all of a sudden everybody had to work from home, suddenly there was all sorts of money available to pay for Zoom licenses and upgrade your intranet and get VPNs for everybody, and maybe even buy a printer for employees at home or send them a laptop computer. And so that money just suddenly showed up. And so what you might want to do is to talk to your leadership about how, hey, you know what? It isn't only our employees that are at home that have to interact with us, it's our customers too. And maybe we need to figure out how to spend the money to get them to be able to interact with us the same way we spent the money for our employees to be able to do it. And so that we're starting to see at a few companies.
The other thing that I think is very worth talking about in the couple minutes we have left is, of course, we're seeing regulations like GDPR, we're seeing things like ITP and ETP starting to kill the cookies. Those are incredibly powerful trends that are making it harder and harder and harder to get personal information and the like. What do people do about this?
Well, I mean, one of the things you can do is, if you think about how data can be collected on just about everything now, you can collect data on activity of people anonymously. And by looking at large groups of activity, you don't need to collect personal information. You can actually collect anonymous information. You can actually do personalization without having to cookie people to find out every last detail about their industry and how big their company is and what's their underwear size. You don't need to buy all this information. You don't need to spy on people. You can kind of just look at behavior and see all these other people that went to these pages, they were trying to do this. So how come we can't just try and show that to the next people that come doing those things? There's lots of ways to use behavioral analytics that doesn't use any personally identifiable information to really move things forward.
So we're going to take a couple of questions from the audience. We have one from Kristen, who asked, is it worth investing in strong landing pages for once you drive web traffic? So there are two answers to this. The answers are yes, of course. You want to have a landing page that does a good job for customers. But also you have to think about, define what is a good job. Is a good job to get somebody to submit a lead form at that moment, or is it to progress them to the next stage in the buyer's journey? When Mike was talking before about, content recommendations and the like, the first landing page they see may be a good place to ask them to convert to, submit a lead form, to download an ebook, to get in touch with a salesperson. But also the next best thing to offer them may be something other than that overcomes those trust barriers, that makes them feel more comfortable, that makes the site do a better job of progressing them to the point where they are in fact ready to submit a lead form. So you need to think about both pieces of that, and content recommendation is one of the things we think is really useful there.
That's really helpful, Tim. So we're about to run out of time here. So if people have questions they didn't have a chance to ask, how can they get in touch with us, Tim?
Yeah, sure. So they can visit our website at solosegment.com. They can email me at tim@solosegment.com. We have an ebook that talks about how you can get started with anonymous personalization for search and for content recommendations. We obviously encourage you to take a look at that when you get a chance.
Terrific. And we do really encourage you that if you have questions that we didn't have a chance to answer today, definitely reach out to Tim at solosegment.com. We'd love to answer your questions. Happy to get on a call with you to find out what your problems are. We've been talking to an awful lot of marketers over the last few months about the shift that they need to make now, and we're happy to spend some time to find out what's going on with you. I think we're about out of time. Margaret, I think it's time for us to throw it back to you.
Well, Tim and Mike, gosh, thank you so much. And for anyone who was interested in connecting with them, we can certainly help put you together as well. Our audience sent in some great questions. We appreciate them joining us and taking a little bit of a tour on a different format for today. If anybody would like to learn more from Mike or Tim, you can look for them teaching in the following mini MBAs: Business Essentials, Customer-Centric Management, Engineering and Technology Management, Digital Marketing, and Social Media Marketing. There are program start dates and other details available on our website. If you're an RBS alumnus, don't forget to proudly indicate it on your mini MBA application to receive a generous discount. I have a friendly reminder to everyone that our virtual Lunch and Learn series takes place mostly on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Time. Always good to check our schedule for any deviations. For more information about our future webinars, I'm going to give you a long website, but we also email it to you, so don't worry if you don't catch it all. business.rutgers.edu/alumni/lifelong-learning. Our exciting schedule of topics and presenters is the result of great comments and suggestions from our audience. So we encourage you to keep sharing your thoughts with us so the series can continue to meet your evolving needs. So please stay with us online for just a moment longer as today's webinar ends, because you'll immediately see a very brief 3-question survey about today's event. And one of those questions is actually a free-form field that you can type in topics and/or speakers you'd like to see featured in future webinars. As I mentioned earlier, when our webinar began, a link to the archive recording of this presentation will be shared via social media and emailed to registrants. It'll also be on the Business Insights page of our website. And Mike, would you mind advancing to the 1,000 laptops? Perfect, thank you so much. We've started to close our webinars with a component called the 1,000 Laptop Challenge. Our students and their families have endured financial hardship since COVID-19 rocked all of our worlds. They quickly entered a remote learning environment that required technology such as laptops, and Mike and Tim actually referenced some of those technology challenges on the company end, but you can appreciate that someone at home would have the same thing. They simply can't afford things like laptops. So corporate sponsors, promotional partners, and individual contributors can help by donating to the 1,000 Laptop Challenge Fund. You will receive an email with more information about how you can be part of this important initiative, and a link to the donation webpage will be included as well. So we appreciate any kind support we receive. So thanks so much to Mike, Tim, and a fantastic audience. Have a great day, and bye for now.
Thanks, Margaret.
Thank you so much. Bye now.